The spammers are losing the battle. The latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. Following a growing issue with spam email to podcasters, and after Apple said they no longer needed email in feeds, Buzzsprout has become the first major podcast host to remove email addresses from RSS feeds. They'll give the ability to add them back in temporarily to help claim shows. Well, there's a new tag for this. It's called Podcast TXT, an alternative method to allow podcasters to claim their podcast without any email addresses. More details about that in just a second. Former podcast consultant Tanner Campbell has made his course on how to launch a podcast entirely free. You'll find that linked from our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. Amazon has fired half of its AMP live radio division, reports Business Insider. The app is US only and still not available on Android phones. It appears to affect 150 people, suggesting that the product has 300 staffers. Wonder what they all do. Presumably they don't make Android apps. Twitter employee Leah Culver, the co-founder of the Breaker podcast app, has pictured herself holding the source code of part of Twitter Spaces, following an apparent order by Twitter's new owner Elon Musk to print out all the code for a code review with Musk himself. There are rumours that blue-ticked users will be forced to pay $20 per month to keep the verification tag. Well, Twitter has paused the sale of ticketed spaces. They're equivalent to a paid Clubhouse room, and speaking of which, Clubhouse CEO Paul Davison spoke at a conference only last week. Detail.co is a new tool built for quickly shooting multi-camera video. It might be useful for podcasters producing video content, we think. And Earbuds this week has spooky, funny, fun podcast recommendations for Halloween, curated by Anita Flores. In People News, Natalie Hauptman, a former marketer for Manscaped, has launched Podscale, a podcast advertising agency. She says, "We found the vast majority of agencies that offer podcast advertising don't specialize in it and only offer it because their clients demanded it." It's a Monday, so time for some tech stuff. The podcast text tag in the new podcast namespace has been formalized. It's partially a way for a podcaster to put a piece of text, like a challenge token or a verification code, in their feed to claim their podcast. Well, we've removed the iTunes owner tags from all of our RSS feeds as well. We'd removed email from one of them a while back with no ill effects. Facebook is working on a new audio compression format, claiming to offer 10 times better audio compression than MP3. This news comes a month after Google demonstrated their new speech codec called Lyra version 2. Meanwhile, Opus, which offers 3 times better audio compression than MP3, is supported by all Android phones, Microsoft Edge, and Google Chrome on Android, Windows, and Mac OS. It isn't, however, supported by iOS. Currently proposed is Podcast Remote Item, which allows podcasters to link to individual parts of other people's feeds. If you're wanting a feed to test this on, we link to a Remote Item RSS feed today, which is trailers from shows that Podnews has recently featured. We link to more information and a normal feed at podnews.net/trailers. And if you use it, there's a new version of Umbrel out today. It's version 0.5.2. And in podcast news, from Lemonada Media, Being Golden is your chance to see the world through the eyes of 4 people over 60 as they pursue their passions, make new connections, and experience loss and heartbreak. And we thank Lemonada Media for their support over the last 2 months. The Vox Markets podcast has Stuart Last, the CEO of Audioboom, as a guest. He discusses the company's latest financial results and claims the company outpaced their competitors in the fastest growing media sector of podcasting. 1 minute remaining, Stories from the Inmates has hit number 3 in the Apple podcast charts in Australia. The show hears from prison inmates about their stories, sometimes stories of innocence, sometimes not. And Lateral with Tom Scott is a new podcast about interesting quiz questions and even more interesting answers. Tom Scott is a popular British YouTuber. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.